In taverns and guild halls across Gielinor, old voices still speak of the day two heroes met under a blood-red sky. It began in a quiet farming village at summer's end, where dread had crept in like a sickness. Livestock vanished from locked pens. A blood-red star glowed nightly to the north. The villagers of Pinevale whispered that it was an omen of Zamorak's shadow returning. Roderick, a wandering swordsman, arrived at Pinevale seeking only supper and rest. Instead, he found fear. As dusk fell, a frantic shout rang through the dusty tavern. "Fire in the fields!" Without hesitation, Roderick snatched up his sword and sprinted outside with the villagers. Across the darkening fields flickered an ominous orange glow. A hulking, lesser demon, wreathed in hellish flame, was stalking toward the village. Behind it skulked robed cultists, chanting praise to Zamorak. The demon let out a roar and sent panicked townsfolk fleeing. Sword in hand, Roderick charged to intercept the monster before it could reach the cottages. The demon's claws slashed out, narrowly missing as Roderick ducked and struck back, steel biting into fiendish flesh. The beast bellowed in rage, eyes burning like hot coals. As Roderick fought, one of the cultists lunged at him with a jagged blade. A sudden burst of brilliant light struck the demon's flank, throwing it off balance. Roderick stole a glance over his shoulder. A young woman in travel-worn mage's robes stood at the edge of the field, her staff raised. She had arrived seemingly from nowhere to aid them. With calm focus, she hurled another spell, crackling arcs of lightning that wreathed the demon, making it shriek. Together, the swordsman and the mage pressed the attack. Roderick fended off the lunging demon and its slashing claws, while the mage's magic battered it with holy light and ice. Under their combined assault, the infernal creature staggered. With a final mighty swing, Roderick cleaved his blade into the demon's chest. The beast collapsed into ash, its death scream echoing across the fields. Seeing their summoned monster destroyed, the cultists howled in outrage. One attempted to fling a curse at the heroes, only to be struck down by a bolt of lightning from the mage's staff. The remaining robed figures scattered into the night, fading like evil wraiths into the distant woods. In the sudden quiet, Roderick stood catching his breath. The young mage approached, moonlight revealing a determined face framed by wind-swept brown hair. "Thank you for the timely help," Roderick panted, offering a respectful nod. "And you for yours," she replied, voice steady despite the adrenaline of battle. "I am Althea, of the Wizard's Tower. I've been tracking those cultists." Althea nudged one of the fallen attackers with her boot, her expression grim. "They are followers of Zamorak, trying to breach the veil and let their banished god back into our world." Roderick's jaw tightened at the name. Zamorak, the dark god of chaos, long exiled from Gielinor after the ancient god wars. The cultists' dying snarl still rang in his ears. Zamorak will rise again. If these zealots had their way, the peaceful villages of the realm would burn. The villagers of Pinevale began to creep back, wide-eyed and trembling in the torchlight. The village elder stepped forward, leaning on a staff, voice quavering with gratitude. "Brave souls, you saved us. Bless you both." Others murmured agreement, offering thanks and frightened questions. Roderick cleaned his blade and sheathed it. "We're glad we arrived in time," he said gently, "but this attack was no random raid. These cultists serve Zamorak. We must warn the authorities and gather help." He shared a quick look with Althea, who nodded firmly. "I will go with you," Althea said. "The Wizard's Tower and the Knights of Misfallen must hear of this threat. Tonight proved that alone neither steel nor sorcery is enough, but together we have a chance." The elder wrung his hands, fear evident in his lined face. "What can simple folk like us do against a god's followers?" "Spread word to nearby villages," Althea advised, "and stay vigilant. You are not alone. The forces of good will rally. She placed a comforting hand on the old man's shoulder as villagers hurried to tend the wounded and douse smouldering patches of field. The elder insisted Roderick and Althea take some provisions for their journey. Though eager to set off, they accepted a few minutes' rest and water. Roderick took the opportunity to tighten his armor straps and catch his breath. Althea quietly recited a small healing incantation over a burn on Roderick's forearm, the skin knitting closed softly. Before long, the first hint of dawn glimmered in the east. Roderick and Althea stood at the village's edge, ready to depart. Behind them, Pinevale's people watched with a mixture of hope and worry. "Thank you," a farmer called out, lifting his little girl into his arms. "You are always welcome here, heroes." Heroes. Roderick felt a slight flush at the word. He was but a wandering knight-errant, and Althea, a scholar far from home. Yet, in the eyes of these villagers, they had become something more in one night, symbols of hope against the darkness. "We will return when the threat is ended," Roderick promised. He did not know if fate would allow it, but he meant to keep that promise if he could. With that, the swordsman and the mage set off down the road toward Varrock, where the spires of the mage's tower and the banners of Miss Talin's guard would soon hear their tale. The morning sun climbed behind them, stretching their shadows long across the path. So it was that two strangers, bound by chance and a common cause, began an epic journey. The legend of their quest spread even then in hushed tones through Pinevale. In time, every village from Lumbridge to Relica would know how a demon was felled by sword and spell under a blood-red omen. The first chapter in the battle against Zamorak's rising darkness. By midday, Roderick and Althea reached the bustling city of Varrock. They lost no time warning the city guard of the cultist attack in Pinevale. The guards promised to alert King Rold and spread word along the kingdom's highways, but the larger quest remained squarely on the two adventurers' shoulders. Their next stop was the Champions Guild just outside the city walls, a famed meeting place for veteran adventurers. Inside, under timber beams hung with old shields, Roderick and Althea quickly explained their plight to the guild master. He stroked his grey beard, concerned. "Most of our champions are away on their own quests," he said, "but you're welcome to post a call to arms on our board." Roderick scrawled a brief notice, seeking brave souls to aid against Zamorak's cult. As he pinned it up, a voice drawled from a nearby table. "You'll be needing more than 2 swords out there." They turned to see a lean, sandy-haired man in a green cloak, reclining with boots propped on a bench. A short bow and quiver lay within easy reach. He looked up with a crooked grin. "Heard you mention cultists in the north. Might be I can help." Althea eyed him warily. "And who might you be?" He stood and offered a gloved hand in greeting. "Name's Rowan. I know those wild lands beyond civilization. Tracks, camps, the safe paths, all of it. If you're heading into the wilderness after Zamorakians, you'll need a guide." His tone was light, but his eyes were sharp and earnest. Roderick clasped Rowan's hand. "We could use a skilled ranger, but what drives you to volunteer for such danger?" Rowan shrugged, a casual gesture that didn't hide the bitterness in his voice. "Let's just say those cultists have been causing grief near my homeland. I've seen travelers robbed, and worse by their ilk. One was a friend of mine." His jaw tightened briefly before he continued. "I have my reasons to want them stopped, same as you. Besides," he added with a wry smile, "I never could resist a daring adventure." Althea nodded slowly. "Very well, Rowan. Welcome. We're glad to have you." Without further delay, the newly formed trio discussed their plan. Althea recalled a key detail from her studies. To confront demonic forces, we'd benefit from a holy relic or blessing. There is a monastery of Saradomin, northwest of here, near Edgeville. The monks keep ancient relics of light. We should seek their help before we venture into Zamorak's darkness." Rowan perked up. "I know the place. A quiet monastery on a hill. It's somewhat on our way. A short detour that could arm us with a powerful advantage." "Then it's decided," Roderick said. "We travel first to the Edgeville Monastery, then strike north through the wilderness toward the old God Wars battlegrounds where Zamorak's forces gather." That afternoon, they hastily outfitted themselves for the journey. Varric's markets provided fresh supplies, food, water skins, bandages, and a few potions of energy. Roderick acquired a hardy chestnut horse for the group to carry packs, while Rowan checked his bowstring and fletched additional arrows. Althea procured a small crystal from the wizard's tower, a device attuned to send messages over great distance, which she used to notify her order of their route and need for support. By dusk, all was ready. The three met outside the city gates for a final review. The road ahead would take them to the monastery by the next day, then beyond the safety of kingdoms, into the lawless wilderness. Althea carefully rolled up a map marked with the sparse landmarks of the north. "There are no outposts beyond the monastery," she warned softly, "just ruins and ghosts of the past. We must rely on each other." Rowan gave a reassuring grin as he adjusted the sword at his side. "Ghosts and ruins I can handle. It's living cultists and roaming monsters we'll keep our eyes sharp for." Roderick tightened his gauntlets, determination in his eyes. "Whatever we face it together. Let's get some rest and set out at first light." With that, they settled in for a brief night's sleep at a small inn. Dawn arrived sooner than expected. Under a sky tinted rose and gold, Roderick, Althea, and Rowan departed Varric's protective walls. Their quest party had grown from 2 to 3, each member bringing different strengths to the journey. Ahead, the road led through rolling green plains toward the distant woodland and hills. As horses trotted and boots tread along the path, the trio shared bits of their stories to pass the time. Rowan pointed out landmarks from his travels, a distant watchtower, a particular bend in the River Lum that glistened in the morning sun, hinting at the breadth of his wandering life. Althea spoke of her magical studies and the gravity of the threat they now faced. Roderick recounted a few battles he'd fought in defense of the innocent, though he admitted nothing thus far compared to the challenge of thwarting a god's return. By midday, forest gave way to sparse scrubland. The spire of the Edgeville Monastery came into view atop a gentle hill, a beacon of white stone in a sea of green. As they ascended the winding path to the monastery gates, none of them could imagine how this holy refuge would soon shape their fate. Though 3 strangers had set out, they were fast becoming a united band of adventurers, and in the whispering halls of the Champions Guild and the bustling streets of Varrock, rumours already spread of the trio heading north on a heroic quest. It was a small spark of hope kindling in the hearts of those who heard it, a promise that Zamorak's dark plot would not go unchallenged. The Edgeville Monastery was a serene haven of white stone and ivy-clad walls. As Roderick, Althea, and Rowan passed under its archway, the clamour of the outside world fell away, replaced by the hush of prayers and the gentle toll of a bell. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, depicting Saradomin's symbol, bathing the courtyard in hues of blue and gold. A kindly monk in a blue cassock greeted them. "Welcome, travellers. I am Brother Tarlak, abbot of this monastery. How may Saradomin's faithful assist you?" Roderick bowed respectfully. "Good abbot, we seek aid against a great evil. Zamorakian cultists are plotting in the north to revive their dark god's power. We come hoping the monastery holds a relic of holy light that might help us thwart this evil." At the name Zamorak, Brother Tarlak's face grew troubled. He led them into a modest chapel where candles flickered. I have heard whispers of shadows stirring beyond the wilderness. If Zamorak's foul hand moves again, it would indeed be a dire threat. A young woman stepped forward from near the altar, drawn by the conversation. She wore the white and blue robes of a Saradomin cleric, and a silver amulet in the shape of a rising sun hung around her neck. Her blonde hair was bound in a simple braid, and her green eyes shone with earnest compassion. "Father Tarlok, if I may," she interjected softly, "these people speak truth. Just last night I dreamed of a darkness spreading across the north, and a voice told me, when warriors come seeking the light, do not refuse them." She looked at the abbot, then at the visitors. "I believe Saradomin sent them to us." The abbot regarded the young cleric with surprise, then a gentle smile. "Celeste, child, you have always been blessed with insight." He nodded at the party. "We do safeguard a holy relic here, one we vowed to protect until the world's need was greatest. Perhaps that time has come." He motioned for them to follow down a narrow stairway carved into stone. Torches lit the descent into cool, earthen silence. Beneath the monastery lay a crypt whose arched vaults had stood since the God Wars. Brother Tarlak stopped before an iron-bound door inscribed with glowing runes. "The relic you seek is behind this door. The Tear of Saradomin," he explained. "A crystal said to contain the tears wept by Saradomin for the suffering of the world during the last war. Its light can repel even the darkest magic. But to unlock the chamber, one of pure faith must invoke Saradomin's name and pass a trial of sincerity." Celeste squared her shoulders. Though young, she stood resolute. "Allow me, Abbot. I have tended the relic's chamber for years in prayer." At Brother Tarlak's assent, Celeste stepped forward. She pressed her palm against the rune-inscribed door and closed her eyes. In a clear voice she began to recite an ancient litany. "By the grace of Saradomin, Lord of Light, I seek the blessing of the sacred tear. Let only the faithful enter, and darkness be warded away." Her words echoed softly. The runes glowed brighter, and the door creaked open, revealing a small inner sanctum bathed in gentle radiance. On a pedestal of marble sat a crystalline vial shaped like a teardrop, filled with swirling luminescence. Althea and Roderick felt a warmth and hope simply looking at it. Celeste carefully lifted the Tear of Saradomin with reverence. The crystal's glow flared for a moment, as if acknowledging her touch. Suddenly, muffled shouts rang from above, followed by a resounding boom. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Brother Tarlak's eyes widened. What in the name of Saradomin? Rowan dashed back up the stairs to peek through a slender arrow slit. "Trouble," he barked. "A band of black-robed cultists, maybe a dozen, at the gates, and they've brought a creature with them." Even as he spoke, a bestial roar reverberated through the stone halls. The cult had arrived, likely pursuing the heroes, or seeking to destroy the relic before it could be used against their master. Roderick drew his sword at once. "They must have tracked us. We can't let them desecrate this holy place." He looked to Brother Tarlak. The old monk nodded grimly. "We will defend the monastery. Saradomin is with us." Celeste stepped forward, clutching the glowing tear to her breast. Fear flickered across her face at the sound of the monster's roar, but she steadied herself with a whispered prayer. "I will fight as well. This relic's light can aid us." Back in the courtyard, chaos had erupted. The thick wooden gates shuddered under blows from the other side. Monks were ushering acolytes and scribes to safety inside the chapel. With a thunderous crack, the gate splintered and gave way. Through the breach stormed the Zamorakian cultists, eyes blazing with fanatic zeal. At their head was a tall figure with a horned helm, wielding a staff crackling with shadowy energy, presumably a cult leader. Beside him lumbered a horned beast wreathed in flames, a lesser demon summoned from the abyss to do their bidding. "Destroy the holy icon, slay them all," the cult leader screeched. pointing toward the monastery's heart. What he saw instead was a band of defenders standing firm. Roderick and Rowan rushed to the forefront amid the swirling dust and sunlight. Roderick's blade glinted as he parried the first cultist's scimitar slash and countered with a swift strike that felled the attacker. Rowan's bow twanged from behind him. An arrow whistled past Roderick's ear to bury itself in a second cultist's shoulder, dropping the man before he could unleash a spell. Althea stood slightly back, conjuring a protective barrier of shimmering air that deflected a bolt of dark magic hurled by the cult leader. The air crackled as her retaliatory firebolt forced the enemy wizard to duck for cover. The demon bellowed and charged, its clawed feet scattering broken gate planks. It lunged for Roderick, swinging a fiery fist. Roderick braced with shield raised. The impact rang out, driving him back a step. Smoke curled around them as the demon prepared a second swing. "Cover me," came Celeste's voice behind them. The young cleric emerged from the chapel doorway, the tear of Saradomin in her hand, shining like a captured star. She raised the crystal vial high, chanting, "By holy light, be purified." Brilliant white radiance burst forth, washing over the courtyard. The demon shrieked as the light seared its shadowy flesh. The cultists cried out, some recoiling and shielding their eyes as if burned. Even the cult leader staggered, hissing in pain as the holy light disrupted his dark magic. Taking advantage, Roderick surged forward with a battle cry. One clean swing of his sword, now trailing residual light from Celeste's relic, cleaved through the staggered demon's neck. The creature's roar died in a gurgle as it collapsed to the ground, dissolving into foul ash. Rowan and two courageous monks charged the remaining cultists. In the glare of the tier's light, the cultists faltered. Rowan's blade and the monk's quarterstaves swiftly disarmed and incapacitated several more. Realizing the tide had turned, the horned cult leader snarled in frustration. He locked eyes on Celeste, who still held the relic aloft, and began muttering an incantation, gathering a last bolt of crackling darkness at his staff's tip to hurl at her. Althea was quicker. She sliced the air with her hand, releasing a lance of azure energy that struck the cult leader full in the chest. With a strangled scream, he was thrown back against the courtyard wall, his staff flying from his grasp. The dark energy dissipated harmlessly above in a curl of black smoke. In moments it was over. A few surviving cultists fled back through the shattered gate, disappearing into the wilderness beyond the walls. The demon was vanquished and the courtyard lay quiet, save for the heavy breathing of the defenders and the acrid smell of demon ash. Brother Turlak surveyed the scene, clutching a sacred tome to his chest. Though shaken, he smiled in relief at the unlikely band that had saved his monastery. Saradomin's grace shines through you, my friends. We cannot thank you enough. Roderick wiped soot from his brow. Thank the light, and thank Celeste. Without her and the relic, we might have been overrun. He nodded gratefully to the young cleric. Celeste blushed slightly, but met his gaze firmly. I only did what had to be done. I could not let them destroy this place or take the tier. Althea approached, gently examining the glowing relic now resting in Celeste's hands. You wielded its power bravely. Perhaps Saradomin intended it so. Celeste, will you come with us? We journey to face the source of this evil. Your faith in the tier of Saradomin could make the difference between victory and defeat. Celeste took a long breath. She looked around at her home, the scorched gate, the bruised monks tending each other's wounds. Then, her eyes lifted northward, beyond the broken walls, toward the distant lands shrouded in ominous uncertainty. My place is where I am needed most, she said softly. If Zamorak's shadow threatens all of Gielinor, I will go. Saradomin's light must reach where darkness falls. Brother Tarlak put a gentle hand on her shoulder, though sorrow tinged his expression at seeing his young protege depart. He nodded in solemn agreement. The world needs heroes of faith in its darkest hours. Go with our blessings, Celeste, and you, brave warriors, Take the tear of Saradomin, may its light shield you on the perilous road ahead. Thus, as the sun dipped toward afternoon, 4 adventurers left the monastery, where there had been 3, Roderick, Althea, Rowan, and Celeste, rode forth together, hearts bolstered by their recent triumph and the holy relic now in their keeping. Behind them, the monks of Edgeville refastened their gates and offered prayers for the heroes' success. Word of the battle at the monastery spread swiftly through nearby hamlets and along pilgrims' paths. Whispers grew of a band of heroes carrying Saradomin's own light into the wilderness to challenge Zamorak's fell minions. In that retelling, Celeste's name was added to the budding legend, the brave young cleric who joined a mage, a ranger, and a knight on an impossible quest. And the tale continued, its next chapter waiting to be written in the untamed wilds. The further north the party travelled, the more the land itself seemed wounded. Past the monastery's outskirts, they entered the wilderness, a charred, lawless expanse where the soil was salted with old battles and curses. Scraggly trees stood, like skeletons, against an iron-grey sky. No birds sang here. Rowan led them along a fragment of ancient road. All around lay evidence of ruin, blackened craters, half-buried blades, and the lonely foundations of villages razed long ago. Few dared wander this region. Once or twice they spotted distant silhouettes shadowing them, but none approached the armed quartet. By nightfall, they reached the crumbling shell of a long dead town. Walls and chimneys jutted from the earth, overgrown with thorny bramble. They decided to camp under the remnants of a stone archway, which offered some shelter from the biting wind. A small fire was kindled. Celeste clutched the tear of Saradomin and murmured a quiet blessing over their camp. Its gentle light and her prayer eased the weight of gloom around them. Despite their weariness, sleep came fitfully. In the dead of night, Roderick's eyes snapped open at a faint scrape of bone on stone. He sat up, hand on his sword hilt. All around, pale shapes were emerging from the darkness between ruins. "Up, we're not alone," he hissed. The others roused instantly, weapons in hand. Out of the shadows shambled skeletal figures, clad in rusted armor, warriors from ages past, reanimated by lingering malice. Hollow eye sockets flickered with malevolent magic as they closed in. With a shout, Roderick met the first skeleton, smashing it apart with a single cleaving blow. Bones scattered, but more clattered forward in its place. Rowan's arrows shattered a pair of skulls, only for the skeletons to stagger onward, headless, swinging blindly. One thrust a broken spear at Celeste. She parried with her mace, and a flash of holy energy from the relic in her other hand reduced the attacker to dust. Yet for every undead felled, 2 more seemed to crawl from the ruins, guided by a hateful will. A rattling laugh echoed as an especially large skeleton in a tattered Zamorakian war banner stepped into view. Raising a corroded halberd, it silently beckoned its legion onward. The circle of death tightened around the party. "We can't keep this up," Althea cried, blasting a skeleton apart with a burst of fire that barely slowed the advancing horde. Desperation shone in her eyes. In that moment she made a dire choice. Planting her staff firmly, Althea began muttering words no one expected to hear from a wizard's tower mage. Harsh, ancient syllables that crackled with forbidden power. Celeste's heart lurched as she recognized the cadence, a spell from the dark lore of necromancy. Before anyone could protest, Althea stabbed her staff forward and shouted the final word of the incantation. An unseen wave pulsed through the night air. The approaching skeletons halted abruptly, bones rattling violently. The balefire in their eyes flickered wildly, then guttered out. One by one, the skeletons collapsed into lifeless heaps of bone, whatever malevolent force animating them abruptly severed. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breathing of the living. The ruins were once again just piles of the dead, now truly at rest. Rowan exhaled the breath he'd been holding. "Gods above," he muttered, exchanging stunned looks with Roderick and Celeste. Althea stood trembling, whether from exertion or the gravity of what she'd done. Roderick slowly sheathed his sword, breaking the heavy silence. "You saved us, Althea," he said carefully. "Thank you." Celeste approached, the tear of Saradomin's glow illuminating concern on her face. "That spell, it was Zamorakian in origin, wasn't it?" Althea's gaze dropped. "A binding spell I learned from old texts," she admitted. Her voice was quiet but firm. "I used shadow magic to disrupt the curse animating those dead. I know it's risky, but I would not let them kill us." Rowan placed a hand on Althea's shoulder and gave a supportive squeeze. "Risky or not, we're alive because of you. I've no desire to complain about that." Roderick nodded, though worry creased his brow. "Shadow magic takes a toll. Just promise us you'll be careful." Althea managed a small, grateful smile. "I will. I'm just glad you're all safe." Celeste said nothing more, but as she moved to gently consecrate the piles of bones with a prayer, she stole a last uneasy glance at Althea. In her heart, Celeste bore no ill will toward her friend. Althea had acted to protect them. Yet, the sight of those dark runes in the air lingered in her mind like a cold stain. Before dawn, the group doused the remains of their fire and prepared to depart that accursed place. The incident was left behind with the scattered bones, but it weighed silently on their thoughts. Bonds of camaraderie had carried them through the wilderness, but now a sliver of doubt, or perhaps simply concern, crept in alongside their hard-won trust. As they set out under the pale morning sky, each silently resolved to press forward. Greater threats lay ahead than reanimated skeletons. In the legends told later, minstrels would recall the band of four braving the haunted waste. Though few would know of the dark spell a young mage dared to wield to protect her friends. That secret travelled with them in the cold dawn, a reminder that even the brightest heroes tread through shadows on the road to salvation. Morning found the four adventurers trudging onward under a leaden sky. The air grew colder as they left the open wastes behind and began ascending foothills that led toward the far northern mountains. Patches of snow soon appeared among the rocks, and a biting wind swept down from jagged peaks ahead. They spoke little at first, each still absorbed by memories of the night's ordeal. Celeste walked beside Althea, stealing occasional glances at the mage as if trying to find the right words. Althea kept her gaze ahead, face drawn, with worry that the others might see her differently now. By midday, the terrain had grown steep and unforgiving. Grey cliffs loomed to either side as they followed a narrow defile upward. Without warning, the dull sky unleashed a sudden fury of snow. A howling blizzard descended, winds whipping ice crystals around them in a blinding haze. "Quickly, take cover," Roderick shouted over the roar. He spotted a dark opening in the rock wall, a shallow cave. One by one they fought through the gale toward it. Rowan led the jittery horses inside, while Roderick and Althea helped Celeste, who was shivering violently from the cold and exertion. Inside the cave, the wind screamed dampened to a low moan. The space was cramped but mercifully dry. Rowan set about starting a small fire with trembling hands and a bit of dry kindling from his pack. Soon a tiny flame flickered, granting them light and a hint of warmth. Althea pulled off her gloves and gently took Celeste's frozen hands, rubbing warmth back into them. Celeste offered a grateful smile. "The thank you. That storm came so fast, almost unnatural." "It's likely a magical remnant of the God Wars," Althea said. "Legends say the North was cursed with eternal winter during the great battles. The weather itself remembers the fury of the gods." Rowan fed the fire and huddled close. "We should wait it out here. No sense wandering blind and freezing out there." As they settled around the modest fire, an uncomfortable silence grew. Celeste finally mustered her courage and looked to Althea. "I owe you an apology. "And my gratitude," she began softly. "Last night I doubted you because of the spell you used. It frightened me, but you saved us all. I'm sorry for wavering." Althea shook her head. "You have a right to question it. I know what it looked like, what it was. Shadow magic isn't something a wizard of the tower is supposed to know, let alone use." Roderick leaned forward, speaking gently. "Perhaps it would ease all our minds to understand how you came by such knowledge. You carry no taint of evil in your heart, Althea, that I believe fully, but secrets can weigh on a fellowship." Althea took a long breath, gaze fixed on the small dancing flames. "You're right." Her voice echoed faintly in the close cave. "I haven't been entirely open about my past. I didn't want to burden you with it, but after last night you deserve the truth." Celeste placed a reassuring hand on Althea's arm. "Whatever it is, we are your friends. We'll understand." Althea managed a timid smile at that, then began. "Years ago, when I was still an apprentice at the Wizard's Tower, I studied under an accomplished sorcerer named Marvoran. He was brilliant and taught me much, but I eventually discovered he had a terrible secret. Marvoran was a devotee of Zamorak. Quietly, in the tower's archives, he was researching forbidden tomes, curses, necromancy, demonology. He believed knowledge itself was neutral, and that even dark magic could be wielded for power and progress." Her voice faltered briefly. "At first, I only suspected. Strange symbols in his notes, slips of the tongue. Then one night I followed him into the depths of the library. I caught him performing a ritual, trying to commune with what I can only describe as a demonic presence." Roderick frowned, hands unconsciously tightening into fists. "What did you do?" "I confronted him," Althea continued. "He tried to sway me, claimed that Guthix's edicts keeping the gods at bay were weakening, and that the wise should prepare by learning all forms of magic, light or dark. When I refused to join his madness, he attacked me." She absently touched a faint scar along her jawline as she spoke. "In the struggle, I seized one of his own spellbooks and read the first banishment incantation I could find. It was a shadow spell, meant to break an undead thrall's bond. Marvoran wasn't undead, but it did disrupt his magic enough for me to escape and alert the Tower Council." Celeste's eyes were wide. "By Saradomin, what became of Marvoran?" "He fled before the council could arrest him," Althea said quietly. "Disappeared into the wilderness, presumably to join Zamorakian ranks. The Tower Elders purged his research and forbade any pursuit of him. But I kept one of his journals. I studied it in secret to understand the dark arts he dabbled in, so I would recognize them and counter them if ever I encountered such evil again." Rowan nodded slowly. "Smart. Know your enemy, even if it means walking close to his path." Althea gave a half smile. "That was my fault, but it's not something I've ever been proud of. Few at the tower know I delved into those shadows. I worried they'd expel me for it, even if my intent was to combat darkness. So, I carried that secret alone." Roderick reached across and gently squeezed Althea's shoulder. "You are no servant of Zamorak. Nothing I've seen from you has ever hinted at malice. You have a good soul, Althea. You used what you learned to shield us, just as you once used it to stop that traitorous mentor of yours." Celeste nodded, her earlier apprehension easing as she listened. "I believe Saradomin's light can guide even those who tread near darkness, so long as their cause is just. You've proven your cause, Althea. Thank you for trusting us with this." Relief visibly washed over Althea. "You're not angry?" Rowan barked a short laugh. "Angry? Lass, I'd be dead twice over without your quick thinking. I might not know much about arcane rights and wrongs, but I know who I trust at my back." A warm reassurance filled the small shelter. The bonds between them felt renewed, tempered by honesty. Althea wiped moisture from her eyes that wasn't entirely from the cold. "Thank you truly. I won't misuse such magic unless absolutely necessary. I much prefer the spells of light, she added with a grin towards Celeste. Celeste returned the smile, and I will pray for guidance should that time come again. Roderick sat back, prodding the fire with a stick. The road we walk is not a straight or simple one. Each of us carries shadows of the past in some form, but we walk it together now, and that's what will see us through. He glanced over at Rowan. You've hinted of your reasons to hate Zamorak's cult, but we've never pressed you for details. Rowan's easy smile faded a touch. He stared into the flames. Well, we've all lost something to this chaos, haven't we? In my case, it was my younger brother. Fool of a lad went north searching for adventure, thinking he might find treasure in the wilderness. Instead, he found a band of Zamorakian raiders. By the time I tracked them down, Rowan stopped, jaw clenched. Those scum had already offered his heart to Zamorak. I made sure they paid in kind. A heavy silence fell. Celeste reached out and squeezed Rowan's hand sympathetically. He cleared his throat and managed a thin smile. So, that's my dark tale. I usually prefer to look ahead rather than back, but I want you all to know why I'm here. It's not just for coin or glory. I mean to see that no one else suffers what my family did. And you will, Roderick said quietly. We'll see it together. They sat in understanding, the only sound the crackle of fire and the muffled howl of the storm outside. In sharing their burdens, they had lightened them. After a time, the blizzard began to relent. The wind's wail dropped to a whisper, and the daylight brightened at the cave mouth. Roderick rose and peered out. The storm passes. We should move on while we have light. One by one, they stepped back into the frigid mountain pass, renewed in purpose. The world beyond the cave was blanketed in fresh snow, pristine and white under a clearing sky. Far above, the peaks of the God War's range gleamed, beckoning them onward. Rowan pointed ahead with his bow. There, see that notch between those two crags? I reckon that's the pass we need to reach. Nestled in that distant notch was a shadowy cleft, the entrance to the fabled God War's dungeon, if the old maps held true. Even from afar, the group could feel a strange heaviness in the air, as if the land itself held its breath. Celeste tightened her grip on the tear of Saradomin. The final journey begins, she murmured. With steeled hearts, the four heroes marched forward into the high wilderness, their breath plumed white in the thin air as they climbed, and though the cold bit at their faces, a newfound warmth of companionship sustained them. In the villages and guild halls of Gielinor, the storytellers would later say that when the heroes crossed into the land of eternal winter, they carried with them not just a holy relic, but the fire of unity in their hearts, a fire that no storm, no demon, no god could extinguish. At last the four stood before the threshold of the God War's dungeon, a massive stone door set into the mountainside, sealed over by centuries of ice. All around lay the detritus of ancient battle, shattered weapons, fallen banners, and bones entombed in frost. A deathly hush filled the frozen valley. The huge double door bore faint symbols of the gods, barely visible beneath the rime. Celeste stepped forward, raising the glowing tear of Saradomin. Let's try this, she whispered. She closed her eyes in prayer and pressed the relic's light against the ice. Warm radiance pulsed into the frozen gate. Steam curled as holy energy met the centuries-old ice. For a moment, cracks spiderwebbed through the frost, but then a pulse of green light flickered across the door, halting the melting. Celeste staggered back in surprise as the relic's glow was briefly dampened. A gentle voice echoed around them. Halt, travelers, state your intent. They whirled to find a translucent figure stepping out of the ice itself. It looked like an ancient druid, ghostly and calm, with antler-like branches crowning its head. Althea realized this must be a Phyxian guardian left to watch the seal. The spirit's eyes were closed as if blind. Only those who bear peace in their hearts may enter this cursed hall. Do you seek to prolong the bloodshed inside, or to end it?" Roderick stepped forward slowly, holding his empty hands up in a gesture of goodwill. "We come to end it," he said clearly. "Zamorak's followers aim to rekindle the war. We intend to stop them, to prevent any further slaughter." Celeste nodded, lifting the relic. "We carry Saradomin's light as a beacon of hope. We wish to bring peace, not strife." The Guardian drifted closer, silent for a long moment. In the frigid air, the only sound was the faint clink of Roderick's mail and the distant howl of wind through crags. The spirit seemed to study each of them, without eyes, sensing the truth of their convictions. At last, it spoke softly. "Your purpose is just. Go and restore balance, but be warned, within, the warriors of long-dead gods know only war. Do only what you must." The antlered figure raised a spectral arm toward the door. With a low rumble, the ancient enchantment reacted. The thick ice sealing the doors split and cracked. Great slabs fell away, and the colossal stone doors groaned as they slowly swung inward. A blast of cold, stale air rushed out from the darkness beyond. "Thank you," Althea said earnestly, but the Guardian was already fading back into the doorway. A whisper drifted by their ears. "End the fury." Steeling themselves, the four companions stepped across the threshold into the legendary dungeon. The doors creaked shut behind them, sealing with a thud that echoed through the vast interior halls. Dim light from guttering braziers revealed a grand entry chamber, carved from ice and stone. The temperature plummeted further inside, each breath forming a fog. Along the walls, frozen silhouettes of warriors were visible, men and creatures literally embedded in ice, caught in the midst of battle. Some appeared to have been hacked apart even as they froze. It was a chilling tableau of the God War's final moments. Rowan swallowed hard. By the gods, it's as if time stopped here. From deeper within the dungeon came faint sounds, clashing metal, guttural shouts, the distant roar of something inhuman. The ancient battle had resumed when the ice thawed, and it raged still. Roderick drew his sword, its blade reflecting Celeste's pale light. "Stay alert. The Guardian let us in, but nothing inside will welcome our interference." Together, they advanced into the tunnels. Each step echoed against vaulted ceilings crusted with icicles. They passed under archways marked by symbols of Saradomin, Zamorak, Bandos, and Armadil, a stark reminder that all four armies had clashed here. As they rounded a corner, a sudden howl split the air. Two shaggy demonic hounds with burning eyes sprang from behind a toppled statue, teeth bared. Zamorakian watchdogs left from ages past, now prowling the corridors. Roderick met the first with his shield, deflecting its snapping jaws, while Rowan's arrow whistled over his shoulder to strike the second beast in the throat. Althea thrust her staff forward, a lance of flame erupting to engulf the first hound. It yelped and recoiled. Celeste held the tear aloft, and a burst of radiant light forced both creatures back, whimpering in pain at the holy glare. Snarling, the infernal dogs turned tail and fled down a side passage, disappearing into the maze. "Not the welcoming party I'd hoped for," Rowan muttered, lowering his bow. He set a boot against the charred statue for balance, catching his breath. Althea gently touched an ancient symbol carved into the wall nearby. "We must be near the central chambers. The generals and their armies will be further in, and so will Zamorak's followers." Celeste closed her eyes briefly, feeling the relic's guidance. "I sense a great evil ahead. This way." She pointed down a corridor where flickers of red light danced on the icy walls, likely torches or infernal fire. Step by step they delved deeper into that frozen battlefield, hearts pounding. They had passed the frozen gate by proving their peaceful intent, but now they entered a realm where peace was unknown. The cavernous halls around them shook with distant impacts, as if The dungeon itself remembered the fury of gods. United and resolute, the party moved toward the heart of Zamorak's territory within the dungeon. Each knew the final confrontation was drawing near. In Gielinor's legends, it is said the heroes walked through a field of eternal battle, with courage as their only shield. And in that moment, with the howls of demons echoing and the taste of cold metal on their lips, courage was indeed all they could rely on. That, and each other. The corridors of the God Wars dungeon twisted like a frozen labyrinth. The party moved cautiously, boots crunching on frost-encrusted stone. All around echoed the distant din of clashing forces, battles unending in these cursed halls. In shadowy side passages, they glimpsed spectral figures of long-dead warriors, still locked in combat, fading in and out like echoes of a nightmare. They pressed onward toward Zamorak's stronghold. The flicker of red firelight grew brighter as they approached a wide chamber supported by pillars of ice. From within came guttural voices and the drone of a ritualistic chant. Roderick peered around a broken archway. At least a dozen ahead, he whispered. Demons and cultists, and an altar. They saw it, a crude stone altar at the far end, draped in crimson cloth. Hooded cultists encircled it, chanting in a harsh tongue. Around them paced hulking demonic guards, eyes glowing like coals. The chamber was lit by braziers of infernal fire that cast a bloody light. Althea's grip tightened on her staff. If they're performing a ritual, we must stop it. Roderick nodded. He signalled for Celeste to take the lead. Clutching the tear of Saradomin, Celeste stepped forward and whispered a fervent prayer. A pulse of brilliant white light exploded into the chamber, illuminating every corner. The reaction was instant. Cultists cried out in alarm, staggering as the holy light seared their eyes. Two lesser demons near the entrance howled, their shadowy flesh smoking under the radiance. For the light, Roderick roared, charging from cover, with his blade drawn. The others surged with him. They struck hard and fast. Roderick met a lunging demon head-on, his sword cleaving into its chest. The beast gurgled and collapsed, fading into ash. An arrow from Rowan's bow whistled past, skewering a robed acolyte who was raising a hand to cast. The man fell without a sound. Althea sent crackling arcs of lightning, branching through two more cultists, hurling them backward. A massive demon with axe-like arms rushed from the side, swinging for Celeste. Roderick intercepted it with a clash of steel, straining against the creature's strength. Celeste held her relic high, and a beam of blinding light struck the demon's face. It recoiled, screeching, and Roderick seized the moment to drive his sword through its heart. The fiend dissolved, leaving only the echo of its roar. From near the altar, 3 cult magi hurled bolts of blood-red energy at the intruders. Althea quickly raised a shimmering barrier, deflecting the dark projectiles in flashes of sparks. Rowan rolled behind a pillar as scorching runes sizzled past him. He returned fire, an arrow taking one spellcaster in the chest and dropping him instantly. Althea dispelled her barrier and answered with a wave of her staff. Jagged icicles materialized and flew at the remaining 2 casters, impaling one in a spray of dark blood. The final cultist, a tall woman with feverish eyes, shrieked an incantation of raw hatred, aiming a crackling coil of shadow at the group. Celeste stepped forward to meet it. "Enough," she cried, thrusting out the tear's light. A dome of sanctity enveloped the heroes, the incoming curse shattering harmlessly against it. The cultist's face fell in astonishment a split second before Roderick's gauntleted fist struck her temple. She crumpled to the icy floor, unconscious. Suddenly, a hush fell. The chamber was littered with defeated foes, demons banished to smoke, and cultists sprawled amid flickering fires. The acrid smell of burned ozone and brimstone hung in the cold air. Chest heaving, Roderick quickly scanned for any remaining threats. Clear, he panted. They had prevailed. Rowan kicked aside a charred demon helm and moved toward the altar. Upon it, lay a grotesque assortment, a sacrificial dagger, black candles, and a heavy iron-bound tome oozing malevolent energy. Whatever dark rite the cult was undertaking had been decisively halted. "Good work," Rowan murmured, wiping sweat and soot from his brow. Althea grimaced at the sinister tome. She struck it with the end of her staff, and the book's unnatural glow fizzled out. "No more foul magic from you," she muttered. Celeste's light fell upon a broad doorway behind the altar, flanked by grinning demonic statues. From that passage pulsed a wave of heat, and the distinct stench of sulphur. A deep, rhythmic thumping resonated from beyond. Like a monstrous heartbeat, Roderick drew in a steady breath. "Zamorak's inner sanctum lies ahead. I can feel it." Celeste nodded, her face pale but determined. "The evil is strong beyond these doors." The tear of Saradomin in her hand glowed brighter, as if bracing for what lay beyond. They gathered at the threshold of the final passage. Each of the four steadied themselves, exchanging firm nods. Despite exhaustion and wounds, their spirit burned fierce. Together, they pushed onward. The corridor beyond was rough-hewn and bathed in an orange glare. With each step, the heat intensified, and the pungent smell of brimstone grew. At the corridor's end, they entered a vast volcanic chamber. Rivers of molten lava crisscrossed the floor, filling the air with shimmering heat. The glow cast dancing shadows on the towering cavern walls. On a raised stone platform amid the lava stood a monstrous figure. A demon of immense size towered there, wreathed in flame and shadow. Four mighty arms jutted from its crimson torso, one clutching a jagged scimitar, and others ending in razor-sharp claws. Horns curved from its skull, and its eyes burned with malevolent intelligence. Kirill Tsutsarov, Zamorak's general, turned his fearsome visage toward the intruders. A low growl reverberated through the chamber. Behind the demon, at the back of the platform, swirled a vortex of darkness, a portal of crackling red and black energy, likely the very gate the cult had been trying to fully open. "So the meddlers arrive," Kirill rumbled, lips peeling into a fanged sneer. His voice was a thunderclap against the cavern walls. "You worms have slain my servants and dare to intrude upon my domain." Roderick stepped forward, sword raised and shield steady. "Your followers' massacre ends here, demon. This war ends here," Kirill answered with a laugh that echoed like an earthquake. "Foolish, mortal, I am war incarnate. I will shred your souls and offer your hearts to Zamorak myself." With that, the general's forearms flexed, and he launched from the platform with terrifying speed. He hit the ground before them in a crash of sparks and embers, towering twice the height of a man. The force knocked Roderick and Rowan back a step, and the intense heat rolled over them. The demon general roared, raising his massive blade high. The final battle had begun. Kirill Tsutsarov lunged with terrifying speed. Roderick raised his shield, but the massive scimitar smashed through it like tin and drove him to one knee. A follow-up backhand from the demon's claw caught Roderick and flung him against a rock, dazing him. Althea shouted to draw Kirill's attention. Before he could follow up on Roderick, she thrust out her staff and sent a blazing bolt of arcane energy lancing into the hulking demon's side. It struck true, exploding against Kirill's thick hide in a shower of sparks. The demon roared more in anger than pain. Althea's spell left only a scorch mark. Roderick grit his teeth and pushed himself back up, blood trickling from a cut on his brow. His eyes blazed with resolve. Celeste stood slightly behind them, clutching the tear of Saradomin so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Stay behind me, foul creature," she cried, raising the relic high. A cone of brilliant light burst forth, bathing Kirill in holy radiance. The demon general recoiled, an expression of genuine pain crossing his hellish features as the glow seared him. Smoke rose from where the light touched his crimson skin. Kirill hissed and flung an arm up to shield his eyes. Seizing the moment, Rowan fired a heavy broadhead arrow that embedded deep in the demon's torso between thick plates of armor. Kirill bellowed in rage. Ichor oozed from the wound, but the injury only seemed to feed his fury. He fixated on Celeste, recognizing the greatest threat was the relic's holy power. With astonishing agility for his size, he barreled toward her, claws outstretched. Roderick interposed himself, slashing at one of the demon's clawed arms to divert it. His blade bit, and black blood spattered, but Kirill's momentum was unstoppable. One of the demon's other arms struck Roderick in the ribs, talons raking across his armor. Metal screeched and Roderick was knocked aside with a cry, the wind driven from him. Kirill pressed forward, massive scimitar sweeping in a horizontal arc towards Celeste. She barely managed to duck, the blade whooshing inches above her head and slicing through empty air. Althea was immediately at Celeste's side. The mage thrust out her palm, and a shockwave of telekinetic force slammed into the demon's arm, spoiling his aim. The scimitar crashed into the ground instead of Celeste, sending chips of stone flying. Kirill turned on Celeste with all four arms, slashing in a whirlwind of steel. Althea threw up a shimmering barrier in front of them. Sparks flew as the demon's blade and claws crashed against the magical shield, cracking it under the onslaught. "Now, Roderick," Althea cried, voice strained. Bruised and aching, Roderick mustered his remaining strength. He lunged in and drove his blade deep into Kirill's exposed back, up to the hilt. Kirill reared back with an ear-splitting roar, agony coursing through him. Althea's shield shattered, and she staggered back. Roderick yanked his sword free as black ichor gushed from the wound. The demon lashed out blindly in torment, missing the knight by inches as Roderick stumbled out of reach. The demon's movements grew laboured, arms swinging sluggishly as his lifeblood pooled on the stone. One leg buckled beneath him. Celeste stepped forward, breath trembling, but eyes steadfast. She held the tear of Saradomin before her, and its light intensified into a brilliant aura enveloping her form. "This is for all the lives you've destroyed," she said softly, voice echoing with sorrow and wrath. She unleashed a focused beam of pure, white radiance that speared directly into Kirill's chest, illuminating him from within. The demon general's remaining defiance crumbled. Kirill Tsutsarov let out a final, terrible shriek as the holy light bored through his corrupted heart. His massive form convulsed, outline sizzling in radiance. With a last guttural groan, the great demon toppled forward onto the stone floor. The impact rattled the cavern, flames guttered and died around his body, and his forearms slackened, the scimitar clattering from his grasp. Smoke rose from the smouldering carcass as the infernal life faded from his eyes. They had done it. The monstrous general of Zamorak lay dead at their feet. They had scarcely a moment to savour the victory when a harsh crackling sound drew their eyes to the dais beyond Kirill's body. The swirling portal that the cult had opened still churned, now unstable without its guardian. With Kirill's death, the magic binding it was unravelling. The vortex of darkness and flame expanded and spasmed, bolts of wild energy lashing out to the cavern walls. Chunks of rock rained down as the very chamber quaked anew. Celeste turned toward the portal, the tear of Saradomin in her hand, pulsing urgently, as if sensing the catastrophic power building. "The portal, it's collapsing in on itself," she shouted over the rising din. "If it explodes or fully opens," Althea's eyes widened. She knew the volatile nature of such rifts. It could devastate everything, possibly rip half this dungeon apart, or worse, allow Zamorak's essence through. Roderick grit his teeth, forcing himself upright. They had come so far. To fall now to a cataclysmic blast, or an unleashed god would be unthinkable. How do we stop it? Can we close it? Celeste's face was illuminated by the strobing red light of the unstable portal. She clutched the relic close to her chest, resolve sharpening in her eyes. The tear's power might seal it, but it will take all I can summon, and more." Roderick turned to her, suddenly fearful at the tone in her voice. "Celeste, what are you saying?" She looked back at her friends, at Roderick's stricken, battered face, Althea's anxious eyes, Rowan's weary yet hopeful smile, and a calm acceptance washed over her features. "This relic was given to us to end the darkness," Celeste said quietly. "That duty falls to me now. You all must get to safety." Althea moved to rush forward, but Roderick caught her arm, his own eyes brimming with understanding. His voice broke as he whispered, "The gods be with you, Celeste." Celeste offered them one last radiant smile, full of peace, courage, and love. "Go. Remember that light always lives on." With that, Sister Celeste of Saradomin stepped toward the furious portal, the brilliant crystal held high, like a fallen star. The others had no choice but to retreat, half dragging a reluctant Althea, as Celeste began to pray in a clear, unwavering voice. Her words echoed over the thunder of chaos. "By Saradomin's blessing and Guthix's balance, let this darkness be sealed." Celeste plunged the tear of Saradomin directly into the heart of the portal. A blinding explosion of light and shadow erupted, engulfing the chamber in a thunderclap of power. Roderick, Althea, and Rowan were thrown off their feet by the shockwave as a final scream of energy rattled the cavern. Then, silence. Dust and silence hung in the cavern as the blinding explosion faded. For a few heartbeats, nothing stirred among the rubble and flickering shadows. Roderick was the first to rise, coughing and bruised. "Celeste," he shouted, voice echoing. Althea and Rowan staggered up beside him, their ears ringing. Where the portal had raged, the stone dais was now cracked and blackened. Of the vortex of darkness there was no sign, only wisps of smoke drifting in the still air. And there, crumpled at the center of the scorched platform, lay Celeste. They ran to her. Celeste was on her side, the tear of Saradomin still clasped in her hands. The crystal had gone dark, its light extinguished, and surface spiderwebbed with fine cracks. Celeste's breathing was shallow, her robes charred and skin pale, but her eyes were open, calm and clear. Roderick gently lifted her into his arms. "Celeste, please, stay with us," he begged, tears welling in his eyes behind the grime. Celeste managed a faint smile. Is it done?" she whispered. Althea knelt, brushing soot from Celeste's cheek with trembling fingers. "The portal is sealed. Zamorak's threat is ended, thanks to you." A weak sigh escaped Celeste's lips, and she closed her eyes briefly in relief. "Praise Saradomin," she breathed. Rowan bowed his head, choking back a sob. "You saved us all," he said, voice thick. They could all see that Celeste's life force was fading quickly. The young cleric had given everything of herself to contain that evil. Roderick's tears spilled freely now. "You're a hero, Celeste. Gielinor will remember your name, I swear it." Celeste opened her eyes once more, mustering her remaining strength. "Do not weep," she said softly. "This was meant to be. I'm just glad I did not walk this path alone." Her gaze moved lovingly over each of them. Althea clasped Celeste's hand tightly, her own tears falling. "We will never forget you," the mage whispered, voice breaking. Celeste's lips curved in that gentle, radiant smile they knew so well. "Thank you for allowing me to be part of this legend." She coughed, a strain of pain crossing her face, and Roderick held her closer. In that moment, a single shaft of dawn light pierced through a fissure high above, illuminating the dais in gold. Morning had come to the surface. The glow fell upon Celeste as if the heavens themselves reached to embrace her. She seemed content, eyes reflecting that dawn. "The night ends," Celeste murmured. "The light always returns." Her gaze fixed on the beam of sunlight, and then, with a final peaceful sigh, Sister Celeste closed her eyes. The hand holding the now dull crystal slackened, and her head gently tilted against Roderick's chest. For a long time, the 3 remaining adventurers stayed there, encircling their fallen friend in quiet grief. The only sounds were their subdued sobs and the distant drip of water in the cavern. Eventually, Roderick carefully lifted Celeste's body, wrapping her in his cloak. "We should take her home," he said, his voice raw but determined. They departed that accursed chamber, leaving behind the smouldering remains of Zamorak's general and the shattered portal. The dungeon was silent around them, as if even the ancient warriors within paid respect to the sacrifice that had been made. Under the cold morning sky, Roderick, Althea and Rowan emerged onto the snowy plateau, carrying Celeste's body. The fierce winds had died down. An uncanny peace blanketed the battlefield that had once been so turbulent. The sun crested the eastern mountains, shining brilliantly on the endless snow. Daybreak after the longest night. The journey back was somber. They bore Celeste to the Edgeville monastery she had called home. Word of their quest had preceded them, through messenger, and the monks were waiting in mourning. Brother Tarlak met them at the gate, tears in his kind eyes as he looked upon Celeste's still form. The following day, they laid Celeste to rest in the monastery garden under an ancient yew tree. The winter air was quiet and crisp as Brother Tarlak said final prayers of light and remembrance. Roderick, Althea, and Rowan stood together, supporting one another as they wept freely. Though their hearts ached, they took comfort knowing Celeste's sacrifice had saved countless lives. After the funeral rites, the 3 heroes stayed in the garden long after others had gone. Althea broke the silence, her voice hushed. "She truly was our guiding light." Rowan managed a slight smile. "And that light will live on in every tale told of this day." Roderick straightened, placing a small carved wooden amulet, the same Saradomin symbol charm a villager had given him at the very start of their journey, atop Celeste's simple gravestone. "We'll make sure the world knows what she gave for it," he said quietly. There was nothing more to be said. With heavy yet hopeful hearts, the 3 made ready to depart the monastery. They had shared an experience that bound them forever. In the sunrise that followed sorrow, they understood that the best way to honor their friend was to live bravely and kindly, as she had. At the gates they paused. The rising sun painted the sky in hues of rose and gold, much like the dawn when their journey first began in Pinevale. Althea pulled her cloak tighter and looked to her companions. "Where will you go now?" Roderick inhaled the crisp air. "There are always more in need of help. Perhaps I'll continue roaming, lending my sword wherever darkness gathers," he replied, though now his eyes held a new wisdom and resolve. "I'll return to the tower," Althea said thoughtfully. "There, I'll ensure knowledge of these events is preserved. Others can learn from what we faced." Rowan managed a slight smile. "As for me, I think I've had my fill of demons and gods for a lifetime. Maybe I'll hunt something tamer for a change." He hefted his bow, then added softly, "But if ever either of you need me, you'll find me at your side again. That's a promise." They joined hands in a silent vow of friendship and remembrance. Then, with one last glance back at the peaceful monastery and Celeste's resting place beneath the snow-laden yew, they parted ways, 3 heroes setting out toward different horizons, forever linked by one shining legend. Unbeknownst to Roderick, Althea, and Rowan, their story had already begun to travel on the lips of pilgrims and messengers, carrying the news to every corner of Gielinor. A legend was growing, the legend of the band of adventurers who dared to defy a god, and through courage and sacrifice restored the light. Years passed, and the tale of the four heroes spread across Gielinor like dawn's first light. In cozy village taverns and bustling guild halls, storytellers recounted the saga on cold nights, how a brave band of adventurers stood against Zamorak's darkness and prevailed. The story took on a life of its own, woven into the folklore of the land. Around a crackling hearth in Lumbridge, an old farmer lifts a child onto his knee and points to the evening stars. "You see that bright one there?" he says, referring to a particularly luminous star. "Some say that's Sister Celeste watching over us. She gave her life so we could all sleep safe under these skies." The child listens wide-eyed as the old man tells of the shining cleric who held back a god's wrath with the light of Saradomin. In Varroc's busy square, a travelling bard strums a lute and sings a ballad to a rapt crowd. Four came from the far corners, 'neath banners of night, to challenge dread Zamorak with steel and with light. In the frozen north shadow, their legend began. By courage and sacrifice did they safeguard all man. Merchants pause in their trading to listen. Guards upon the city wall murmur the chorus under their breath. The names of Roderick, Althea, Rowan, and Celeste have become familiar music to the ears of common folk, heroes as beloved as any in old epics. At the Champions Guild, a newly painted mural titled Zamorak's Bane in the guild hall honours the four heroes battling the demon general. Veterans tell recruits how Sir Roderick and his companions stood fast against impossible odds, each playing their part in the legendary fight. In the quiet cloisters of the Wizard's Tower, Althea's own written chronicle of the quest occupies a place of honour in the library. Young magicians pore over her descriptions of ancient spells and the battles beneath the ice. The tome's final chapter, dedicated to Sister Celeste, often leaves readers misty-eyed. Many a mage who lights a candle in the tower's chapel does so with a whispered prayer of thanks to the cleric who fell so that balance could be restored. Far to the west, a rugged ranger with a sandy beard and a green cloak sits at a corner table in an Ardoon tavern, quietly nursing an ale, as a minstrel at the bar retells the saga. Rowan smiles to himself at the minstrel's embellishments. The ranger's arrows in the story now supposedly never missed a mark, even in pitch darkness. He doesn't bother to correct the exaggerations. Instead, when the song is done and applause fills the room, Rowan leaves a few coins in the minstrel's cup and slips out into the night, disappearing like a silent guardian back into the wilderness he loves. And what of Sir Roderick, the wandering knight? In Misthalin and Asgarnia, travellers occasionally report encountering a lone warrior on the road, cloaked in humble garb, but ever willing to lend aid against marauding beasts or bandits. Those helped often notice the knight wears around his neck a simple wooden amulet of Saradomin, a keepsake he refuses to part with. When asked his name, he modestly avoids the question, but the thankful peasants have their suspicions, and soon whispers spread that the hero of the north still walks among them, doing good wherever darkness encroaches. Back at Edgeville Monastery, the rose bushes bloom beautifully in the spring, following the terrible winter of the cult's threat. The monks maintain a modest stone monument beneath an old yew tree in the courtyard, Sister Celeste's resting place. Pilgrims travel from afar to lay lilies and carved wooden prayer symbols at her grave, tokens of gratitude from people who never met her, but live safely because of her sacrifice. On clear nights, the monks swear that the stars above the monastery shine with particular brilliance, as though the heavens too honour their departed sister. The legend touches all corners of the realm. Each teller adds their own flourish, a clever line of dialogue here, a dramatic thunderclap there. But the core of the story remains true, a group of ordinary individuals from different walks of life, united to challenge a great evil. They braved haunted ruins and howling blizzards, fought unimaginable horrors, and never faltered in loyalty or resolve. They proved that even a god's wrath was no match for mortal courage, combined with friendship and faith. The story, now passed down through generations, has taken on the cadence of a fable or a favourite old myth. It is told to inspire hope in times of fear, and to teach the values of bravery, unity, and sacrifice. Many who hear it feel their hearts stir and ask, would I have done the same in their place? And in that introspection, the legacy of those heroes continues to guide and uplift. On a certain winter's eve at the inn in humble Pinevale, the very village where the first demon attack occurred, the elder who witnessed that night retells the adventure one more time. By the fireplace, villagers young and old listen closely. The elder's voice quavers as he reaches the end. And so, with Zamorak's plot foiled and peace upon the land, the heroes went their separate ways. But their story lives on, carried in our hearts. We will tell our children and our children's children, so that the light they ignited never dims. When he finishes, a thoughtful silence reigns in the little tavern. Then one child pipes up, eyes shining, "Grandpa, do you think I could be a hero like that one day?" The old storyteller smiles, placing a gentle hand on the child's head. "If you have a brave heart and true friends beside you, my dear, perhaps you will. The world will always need heroes. Outside, the wind has settled, and a million stars glitter in the velvet sky. Among them, one particularly bright star twinkles above, as if in agreement, and inside the tavern, the laughter of villagers and the hopeful chatter of children rise, warm and enduring, a living testament to the power of a tale and to the light of a legend that will never die.